What's up guys, it's Cal, and in this video we'll be taking a look at Windwalker monks on the Battle for Azeroth beta. We're going to be taking a look at their baseline abilities as well as their passives, then we'll be looking at their talents and PvP talents. And there definitely are a moderate to high amount of changes in case you're wondering. Now just like my other overview videos, the purpose of this is not meant to tell you which talents to pick for the best DPS, or if Windwalker is one of the best specs at DPS. This is merely to show you what's to come. So, let's get started. So here are all the baseline abilities for Windwalker monks. They've got Detox, they've had Detox, it's not changed, 20 energy, 8-second cooldown, it removes all poisons and disease effects from a target. Now, Windwalker monks are getting Vivify, because as you see here, a fuse is actually removed. So it's being replaced by Vivify, and that actually does the exact same thing as a fuse did. So it causes a surge of mists, healing the target for some amount. Then there's Spear Hand Strike, not changed. This is your interrupt, 15-second cooldown. Paralysis is having its cooldown increased from 15 seconds to 45 seconds. I don't know why, but it just is. It still costs 20 energy, it still incapacitates the target for 1 minute, and you can only do it to one target, and then damage will of course cancel the effect because it's a CC. Now Flying Serpent Kick, not really changed. Still has a 25-second cooldown. You soar forward through the air at high speeds for 1.5 seconds. So on live it's 2 seconds, meaning you get to your destination faster. If used again while active, you'll land, dealing damage to all enemies within 8 yards and reducing movement speed by 70% for 4 seconds. And then Leg Sweep is actually baseline now. So it used to be talent, now it's baseline. So the only changes to it is its cooldown is going up from 45 seconds to 1 minute, and then the AoE stun portion of it will stun targets for 3 seconds, down from its 5 seconds on live. And then Spinning Crane Kick. So Spinning Crane Kick now costs 2 chi, on live it costs 3 chi, and spin while kicking in the air, dealing some physical damage over some amount of seconds based on your haste to enemies within 8 yards. That part is the same. Now Spinning Crane Kick's damage is increased by 10% for each unique target you've struck in the last 15 seconds with Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, or Rising Sun Kick. On live that is 40%. So it is getting a little bit of a nerf there, but it is costing 1 less chi, which is nice. And then there is Touch of Karma, which is actually not getting changed at all. So 1.5 minute cooldown, all damage you take is redirected to the enemy target as nature damage over 6 seconds. Damage cannot exceed 50% of your maximum health, and it lasts 10 seconds. Storm, Earth, and Fire is also not getting changed. It has 2 charges, 1.5 minute cooldown. You split into 3 different elements. They all deal 45% damage, and you control the Storm Spirit. It does the same thing as on live. And then there is Touch of Death. So for the most part, it does the same thing. Still 2 minute cooldown, inflicts immortal damage to an enemy, causing the target to take damage equal to 50% of your maximum health after 8 seconds reduced against players. But then the second effect, during this 8-second duration, 10% of all other damage you deal to the target will be added to the final damage dealt. Now that was an artifact trait called Gale Burst. So since we won't have artifact weapons anymore, they just baked that trait into the Touch of Death ability. And then we have Provoke, which is your taunt. It's of course not changed, 8-second cooldown. Use it on an enemy and they'll be taunted to you, and their speed is increased by 50% as they charge to you. Now Disable is not changed, still costs 15 energy, reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds, and then duration is refreshed by your melee attacks. Targets already snared will be rated for 8 seconds instead. So not changed. Tiger's Palm is also not changed. 50 energy, it's a basic attack, you know, it also generates 2 chi. Tiger Palm is an 8% chance to also make your next Blackout Kick cost no chi, which is the same as on live. And then Blackout Kick. Now, Blackout Kick's first effect is the same, it still costs 1 chi, it kicks the target with some chi energy, dealing physical damage, but then it reduces the cooldown of Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury by 1 second when used. So that part is new, and the second effect of it is new. And then we have Rising Sun Kick, not changed. 2 chi, it has a cooldown based off of your haste, and it deals physical damage to the targets and then reduces their effectiveness of healing for 10 seconds. And then Fist of Fury has a cooldown based off your haste, around 20-ish seconds, still costs 3 chi, so it's still a channeled ability that pummels targets in front of you. The only change to it is it will now deal most of its damage to your main target and then less damage to surrounding targets. So in live it just does like a strict amount of damage to all targets in a frontal cone of you. Now it does more to your main target and less to these side targets. And then there's Crackling Jade Lightning, which is not changed. So it costs 20 energy plus 20 per second. Channels Jade Lightning for some nature damage over some amount of seconds to the target, and sometimes knocking back melee attackers. And then roll is of course not changed. You roll a short distance, 20-second recharge, has 2 charges to it. Transcendence is not changed, 10-second cooldown. You split your body and spirit, leaving your spirit behind for 15 minutes, and then you can use Transcendence Transfer to swap locations with your spirit. Now Transcendence Transfer had its cooldown increase from 25 seconds to 45 seconds. I don't know why, but it just did. And then there's Zen Pilgrimage, which is a 1-minute cooldown. It, brings you to this lovely area, as we all know, Peak of Serenity in Kunlai Summit. And then there is Resuscitate, which is your res. It's not changed at all. You can res a target for 35% health and mana. So now let's take a look at the passive abilities. So we have Afterlife, which is not changed. When you kill an enemy, you summon a healing sphere, healing you for some amount when you walk through it. When you kill an enemy with Blackout Kick, you have a 50% chance to summon a chi sphere, granting 1 chi when you walk through it. So it is not changed. Your mastery is also not changed. Your abilities deal some amount of more damage when they are not repeated of the previous ability. So don't button mash. Actually know what you're doing, is what that means. Now, Mystic Touch is new. This is a passive. Your damage weakens the target, increasing physical damage taken by 5%. So that's nice, it's new. And the Windwalking is of course the same, it's not changed. You and your allies within 10 yards have 10% increased movement speed. Now let's take a look at the talents, and I'll also go over PvP talents in case you care about those. And there's definitely a fair number of changes to the talents. Now the first tier actually just has 1 change to it. It's not Eye of the Tiger. Eye of the Tiger is unchanged. It's a passive. Tiger Palm also applies Eye of the Tiger, dealing nature damage to the enemy and then healing you over 8 seconds. Chi Wave is also not changed, 15-second cooldown. You use it on a friendly target or foe. It deals nature damage or heals, and it bounces up to 7 times to targets within 25 yards. And then Chi Burst. Its second effect is new, so I'll read the first effect. Well, it still has a 30-second cooldown, but the first effect is the same. Hurls a torrent of chi energy up to 40 yards forward, dealing nature damage to all enemies and healing the monk and all allies in its path. And the second effect, Chi Burst, generates 1 chi per enemy target, damage up to a maximum of 2. So that part's new. Now the level 30 tier actually is not changed at all. So Clarity, passive, reduces the cooldown of roll by 5 seconds and increases its maximum number of charges by 1. So it's not changed. Chi Torpedo is also not changed, replaces roll 20-second recharge, torpedoes you forward a long distance, increasing your movement speed by 30% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 2 times. And then Tiger's Lust is also not changed, 30-second cooldown. You can use it on yourself or friendly targets, and it will increase their movement speed by 70% for 6 seconds, and it will remove all roots and snares. So the level 45 tier, Ascension, still a passive. It will still increase your maximum chi by 1, and it will still increase your energy regeneration by 10%, but it will now increase your maximum energy by 20. So your artifact weapon had a trait on it that increased your energy by 40, so we of course won't have artifact weapons anymore, so Ascension now has half of that, at least, baked into it. And then Fist of the White Tiger, so this is actually new. 30-second cooldown, 40 energy. Strike with the techniques of the White Tiger, dealing physical damage, and it generates 3 chi. So that's new. Then for Energizing Elixir, so it has a 1-minute cooldown. You chug an Energizing Elixir, refilling all your energy and instantly generating 2 chi. So it did have a little bit of nerf because on live it generates all of your chi, but now it just generates 2 of it. And then the level 60 tier, so Tiger Tail Sweep is new because Leg Sweep is baseline and this improves Leg Sweep, so it increases the range of Leg Sweep by 2 yards and reduces its cooldown by 10 seconds. And then we have Good Karma. Used to be an artifact trait, but it's completely changed from what its artifact traits iteration does. So Touch of Karma can now redirect an additional 50% of your maximum health. So on live, that artifact trait would heal you for all the directed damage. It doesn't heal you. You can now redirect 100% of your health to the target. And then Ring of Peace is not changed. 45-second cooldown, you put down a Ring of Peace for 5 seconds, and then enemies that walk into it will be knocked backwards. And then the level 75 tier. So this is just as 1 change to it, which is Inner Strength. Inner Strength is new. So each chi you spend reduces damage taken by 2% for 5 seconds, which stacks up to 5 times. So you can constantly have like a 10% damage reduction. And then Diffuse Magic is not changed, 1.5 minute cooldown, reduces magic damage you take by 60% for 6 seconds, transfers all currently active harmful magic effects on you back to their original caster, if possible. So it's not changed. And then Dampen Harm is also not changed. 2-minute cooldown, reduces all damage you take by 20% to 50% for 10 seconds with larger attacks being reduced more, so it's not changed. Then for the level 90 tier, so hit combo did have a little bit of a nerf to it. It's a passive. Each successful attack that triggers combo strike in a row grants 1% increased damage, stacking up to 6 times. So on live, that is a 2% increased damage. So a little bit of a nerf. And then Rush Jade Wind. So this ability no longer costs chi. It used to cost 1 chi. It will now cost 3 energy plus 3 per second. It still has a cooldown based off your haste. Summons a whirling tornado around you, causing some damage every some amount of seconds to all enemies within 8 yards. So this used to have a second effect which applied Mark of the Crane to all enemies it hit. No longer does that. And then Zuin. So Zuin had a little bit of reworking to it. Its cooldown is getting lowered from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, so you can use it more often. You summon an effigy of Zuin, the white tiger, for 20 seconds. On live, that's 45 seconds. And then Zuin attacks your primary target and strikes 3 enemies within 10 yards every 1 second, and it deals nature damage. So it now lasts a shorter amount of time, but it has a 2-minute cooldown. And then the final tier. So Spiritual Focus, this used to be an artifact trait, but it no longer increases Storm, Earth, and Fire's damage by 5%. So what it does now is every 2 chi you spend reduces the cooldown of Storm, Earth, and Fire by 1 second. So it still buffs Storm, Earth, and Fire, just, well, not in the same way. And then Whirling Dragon Punch is not changed. Still has a cooldown based off your haste around 20-ish seconds. You perform a devastating whirling upward strike, dealing damage to all nearby enemies, only usable while both Fist of Fury and Rising Sun Kick are on cooldown. So it's not changed. And then for Serenity, so it still replaces Storm, Earth, and Fire, still has a 1/2 minute cooldown. Now you enter an elevated state of mental and physical serenity for 12 seconds. On live, it only lasts 8 seconds. While in this stage, you deal 20% increased damage. On live, it's 40%. And healing, so 20% damage and healing in BFA, and all chi consumers are free and cool down 100% more quickly. So it lasts a longer amount of time, but your damage and healing increased by less. But yeah, so those are all the talents. Now let's take a look at the PvP talents. So if you're unaware of how PvP talents will work in BFA, this is how it goes. You have these 4 bubbles here. This first bubble is the same for all classes and all specs. It is Adaptation, Relentless, and Gladiator's Medallion. They all do the same thing on live. They're on the first tier on live. You still get to pick between one of these 3. So they're not changed at all. Now these next 3 bubbles are a giant pool of your already existing PvP talents that you get to pick between. So as you can tell, it's no longer on a tier system. You can pick any of these 3. They've just removed a few of them, so you can obviously only pick the ones that are still in the game. So let's say 3 you might really like that are on the same tier on live, you can pick them in BFA. Now as far as changes go to them, there have been a good number of changes. Most classes only have like 1 or 2 changes to the PvP talents, but I think Windwalker monks have like 5 or 6 or something. So I'm gonna mouse over them. I'm gonna read the names of them. If you want to know what they do, you can pause the video or you can look at your Windwalker monk. But for the ones that have been changed, I will of course talk about what that change is. So here we have Fortifying Brew. So it's a 1/2 minute cooldown, turns your skin to stone, increasing your current and maximum health by 20% and reducing damage taken by 20% for 15 seconds. On live, those are both 15%. So it is getting a buff, which is nice. Now, Ride the Wind. Its first effect is still the same. Flying Serpent Kick forms a path of wind in its wake, causing all allies who stand in it to have 30% increased movement speed and to be immune to movement slowing effects. So that part is the same. But then the second part is new, increasing the cooldown of Flying Serpent Kick by 10 seconds. So it's kind of a double-edged sword effect. It has a good and it has a bad. And there's Tiger Eye Brew, which is not changed at all. And then Control the Mists. Now Control the Mists will now affect Vivify because a fuse, as we mentioned earlier, is no longer a thing. Now every 10 seconds, Vivify can be cast instantly and reduce its energy cost by 100%. So that part is new. It will now reduce its energy cost by 100% every 10 seconds. Each chi spent reduces the remaining time by 2 seconds. On live, that is 1 second. So it is definitely getting a buff to it. And then there's Yulon's Gift, Disabling Reach, Grapple Weapon, Fast Feet, Eminence, Heavy-Handed Strikes. Now Heavy-Handed Strikes is pretty much just all around changed. So Fist of Fury damage causes the target to deal 20% less damage for 2 seconds, stacking up 2-3 times. So that's what it does now. Now Tiger Style has also been changed because Leg Sweep is now baseline. So your leg sweeps that hit 3 or more targets will summon an effigy of Zuin, the White Tiger, for 5 seconds. So that's definitely a nice honor talent. And anyways, those are all the honor talents as well as all of the normal talents. And there you have it, all the changes coming to Windwalker monks in the battle for Azeroth beta. Now I'm curious as to what you guys think of these changes. Do you hate them or do you love them? You can let me know in the comments below, but if you guys enjoyed this video, then you can leave a like on it. You can sub to the channel for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.